Today we will discuss the secrets of time, types of conditions, etc. from chapter 46 of Parashara Harasha Sastra.
In this explainer, we're looking at absolutely nothing less than the mathematical architecture of human timelines. We're going to explore a highly structured, research-based framework utilized in ancient texts to map out exactly how and when specific conditions of life actually unfold. I mean, this isn't about vague predictions, right? We're not reading tea leaves here. It's an intricate algorithmic system based on planetary periods, known as dasas. These dasas literally divide a human life into distinct, quantifiable chapters. Because let's be honest with ourselves, who hasn't desperately wanted to know exactly what kind of timing is governing their life right now? The methodology laid out in this text gives us a rigorous procedural blueprint to figure exactly that out. So we're going to break down this architecture mechanically, chronologically, and exactly as it's presented in the primary source material.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What we're looking at is the primary source document. This is the original Sanskrit manuscript of chapter 46, specifically focusing on verses 1 through 5. Now, this text is our foundational evidence for how these planetary periods were originally codified. By analyzing the original script, we get to trace the exact etymology and the true intention behind the whole system. We aren't just relying on secondary interpretations here, folks. No, we're going straight to the source, straight to the dialogue between the omniscient sage Parashara and Muni Maitreya. And this specific dialogue, it essentially establishes the authoritative framework for absolutely everything that follows regarding how time and destiny are calculated.
To truly grasp the depth of this text, let's mechanically break down the semantics of Muni Maitreya's cosmic question in verse 1. The Sanskrit fragment reads, Dasha katividaha santi, tanme kahaya tadvata. If we look at the literal meaning of this inquiry, it translates roughly to dasas of how many kinds are there, that to me tell in truth. In simple English, Maitreya is basically asking the venerable sage, please favor me with guidance about the different kinds of dasas, or periods, of the various planets. It's a very precise, highly technical request. You'll notice Maitreya isn't asking for a sprawling philosophical lecture on the abstract nature of time. No, he's asking for a strict, categorical classification system of planetary periods. Basically, the man wants the raw data.
Now, what's really fascinating about this is how this single introductory verse actually operates on three completely distinct levels. First, astrologically, it establishes the absolute necessity of dasha systems. This is a planetary Time Lord system that activates very different areas of a natal chart at very specific times. Second, philosophically, it represents that deeply human drive to comprehend our own destiny, right? It acknowledges that human existence isn't just static. It constantly shifts based on these ruling conditions. And finally, its practical significance is just immense. It literally prompts the delivery of a concrete mathematical framework for timing events. Think about it. Without this very specific question from Maitreya, we simply wouldn't have the procedural instructions that follow. It perfectly bridges macro-philosophical destiny with practical, usable, everyday mechanics.
Let's move to and see how this builds in the text. Directly following Maitreya's precise question, we transition into Sage Parashara's encyclopedic reply, which covers verses 2 through 5. The sage doesn't just give one simple throwaway answer, he provides a staggeringly comprehensive enumeration of the various conditions of time. He states, O Brahman, dasas are of many kinds. And what follows is a massive structural categorization. The text just begins to list out an incredible array of distinct mathematical systems used to divide up a human life. It is essentially a highly organized, complex taxonomy of time itself.
The sage's reply fragments into exactly 32 distinct planetary conditions, or dasa systems. The text explicitly lists them all out: Vimshotari, Ashtotari, Shodzotari, Panchotari, Satabdika, Chaturshiti Sama, Dvisaptati Sama, Shashti Hayani, Shadvimsati Sama, Kalachakra, and the list goes on. The terminology here is entirely numerical and structural. To give you an idea, Ashtotari relates to the number 108, Shodzotari relates to 116, and Chaturshiti Sama to 84. However, and this is key, the text makes a definitive, authoritative statement right at the beginning of this massive list. It says, amongst them, Vimsholtari is the most appropriate for the general populace. This right here is the foundational rule of the entire chapter. So, while there are 32 distinct systems available, Vimsholtari is officially crowned as the primary, universal standard.
If we telescope out from the direct translation for a second, the analysis of verses 2 through 5 reveals a really profound underlying structure. Astrologically speaking, the existence of 32 dasha types means that time is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. Different birth conditions literally require different mathematical keys to unlock their specific timelines.
Philosophically, this points straight to the deeply cyclical nature of our existence. It tells us that life is governed by rotating, predictable cycles rather than just random, chaotic events happening for no reason. Practically, this is all about methodology. It instructs the practitioner on exactly how to select the correct timing system based on the specific astronomical geometry present at an individual's birth. It's an entirely conditional logic framework. It's an if-then scenario. If this planetary condition exists at birth, then you use this specific dasa system.
So the crucial point we need to take away here is the very clear distinction Parashara makes between the universal and the conditional. On one hand, we have the Vimshottari dasha. This is explicitly mandated as appropriate for the general populace. It acts as the default, overarching system of time applicable to the vast majority of human lives. But on the other hand, we have the 31 specialized systems, which include Ashratari, Shadsottari, Kalachakra, and so forth. The text clearly dictates that these are to be followed strictly in special cases. They are entirely conditional. For example, later on in the chapter, the text notes that Shatarshiti Zaman Dasha is appropriate only in cases where the Lord of the 10th house is posited in the 10th house. So you see, it represents a highly specific, rule-based divergence from that universal norm.
Because Vimshottari is the primary system for the general populace, the text proceeds a bit further down in verses 12 through 14 to detail the rigorous mathematical method for mapping this specific dasa. We are taking abstract theory and turning it into a clear, replicable procedural diagram here. Here's how it works. Step 1. You must count the number of constellations, or nakshatras, starting from Kritika all the way up to the individual's Janma nakshatra, which is their specific natal birth star. Step 2. You take that total number and you divide it by 9. Step 3. You look at the remainder. That single, solitary remainder mathematically signifies the starting planetary lord of the commencing dasa at the exact moment of birth. So for instance, if your remainder is the number 1, that mathematically dictates the sun as your commencing dasa lord. It is an incredibly elegant, fixed algorithm that kicks off your cosmic clock. Now, once you have calculated that commencing dasa lord using the remainder, you must follow a strict, unvarying sequence. The text dictates an exact sequential order of the 9 dasa lords. It always flows in this progression: Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, and finally Venus. So if your remainder calculation indicated that you were born into the cycle of Jupiter, your next life chapter will inevitably be governed by Saturn, followed by Mercury, and so on, looping infinitely through this permanent sequence. The architecture here is completely fixed and unchangeable. There's no deviating from this path.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of parameyurdaya, which is the maximum possible human lifespan, defined by this text as exactly 120 years. In fact, the word Vimshottari literally translates to 120. If you take the entire mathematical sequence we just looked at, the individual periods of the Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, and Venus, and you add all their designated years together, they equal exactly 120 years. This ancient system essentially maps out a complete macroeconomic cycle of a human life, dividing those 120 years into distinct seasonal chapters. Each and every one of those chapters is ruled by a different planetary condition, and it carries its own specific duration and behavioral focus.
As we wrap up our exploration of this specific chapter, we really have to bridge these ancient, rigorous mathematical mechanics with our own modern reality. The architecture of time described by sage Parashara suggests that right now, at this very moment, your life is functioning under a highly specific set of timed conditions. So, the ultimate question becomes, based on this mathematical sequence, where do you currently sit within your own 120-year cycle? What specific planetary period is governing the exact chapter of life you're experiencing today, and how is that overarching condition shaping your current reality? It's a truly fascinating framework to consider, isn't it? Something to keep in mind as you reflect on the mathematical structure of your own timeline.